Right. I did
Hey, friends.
it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dev Relish. For some reason, it feels like we haven't done Dev Relish in a long time, even though it was last month.
We do it every month.
Yeah, it's just we're on an irregular schedule. You can't. Pickling is never like in a perfect science. So like,
No, it's a imperfect science. It's a
yeah.
something that needs a little fermentation, a little extra spice of
Yes.
life.
So anyway, thank you all for joining. I see Cassie's already here. Give us a shout out in the comments if you're around. We love to have a chat in this. It's always a lot of fun. So for those of you who haven't joined us before, this is a show about developer relations, but not just developer relations. There's a whole handful of like roles that are DevRel adjacent. That's why the DevRel-ish. It's not just about pickles, although it's also about pickles. But yeah, so it's DevRel and DevRel adjacent roles. So we're happy you joined us. We do want to take a moment though to thank our sponsor, Data Protocol. Data Protocol is like imagine building like a Netflix for your develop your community. So like Data Protocol gives you like these high quality videos and an interactive console and everything, and you can curate this whole experience for your developer community. So Data Protocol is a great tool if you're in DevRel. So check them out at dataprotocol.com. Thank you, Data Protocol, for being a DevRel sponsor. All right. So with that, we're gonna bring Jay to the stage. I'm gonna let Erin, since Erin, you and Jay have a long history, I guess. Erin will do the introduction.
So yeah, Jay Miller is currently a staff developer advocate at Aiven and also the founder and organizer of Black Python Devs. I'm very fortunate to have followed Jay for a bit of fun times. I'm thinking, what, 3 years ago we first met?
Yeah, it was around 2021, 2022.
Yeah, I think 2021, because I was full in the Python space then. I was dabbling in the Python space before, now that I went full in. And then we just hung out at Python conferences.
Time got weird when they made you stay at home, so I don't know. Time isn't a straight line anymore.
Yeah, no. Was it ever?
Not according to Marvel.
Marvel or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
No, or Doctor Who.
Or Doctor Who.
All of the nerds have been successfully appeased, except for the Trekkies, but they're never happy. It's fine.
True.
All right. So Jay, we usually kind of start out this conversation with what kind of got you into DevRel? Give us a little bit about your experience prior to DevRel and what drew you to actually get into the DevRel space.
Sure. So we'll start. What got me into DevRel was Launch Darkly and a spicy chicken sandwich in Petaluma, California. I had.
We didn't pay you just to be clear.
Yeah,
we did not ask you or pay you or anything. No, like this is not a Launch Darkly show. We just have
this is a
our paychecks. Like Launch Darkly is not paying us.
Yeah, this is a true story, by the way. Super true story. So I was at the time I was a marketer, and I'll go through that long history of like career changes that happened there. But I was a marketer. I was using Python, and I really wanted to go to a Python conference. So the first Python conference I went to was North Bay Python in Petaluma. It was amazing. And there was a really cool talk on documentation and why you should love your document writers. And it shouldn't be seen as like this, secondary role. And the speaker was an amazing developer advocate or developer amongst the world by the name of Heidi Waterhouse, who at the time worked at Launch Darkly and mentioned that Launch Darkly was hiring. And I was like, well, I don't know what to do, but I've been doing this podcasting thing for a while, so that sounds cool. So I sheepishly went up to Heidi and said, hey, Heidi, you don't know me because no one here does, but I heard that your team was hiring. I do this podcast thing. I write content. Maybe this would be a role for me. And Heidi says, let's go get lunch. So as I proceeded to eat that spicy chicken sandwich, which I can remember was actually pretty good, she tried to convince me to move to Oakland, and that was an immediate deal breaker because I lived in San Diego at the time, and why would I ever give up San Diego for Oakland? I mean, tacos aside, like the weather, all the other amazing things. It was not meant to be, but I still bump into Heidi from time to time at many of the conferences that we both frequent, and every time I just have to give Heidi the biggest hug because I didn't even really know what I still don't know what DevRel is. I've been in the industry for like 5 years. But
I mean, do we know what DevRel is? That's
this whole show is about figuring it out. One day we'll know. When we figure it out, the show's over.
That's it.
We quit the show.
But that journey that kind of led to that point. I served in the U.S. Marine Corps. I dropped out of college, and military was like the next option. So I did that for 5 years. I got to travel all over Southeast Asia. That was amazing. I mostly enjoyed. That was a highlight in my life. I got stationed in San Diego, where I met my wife, who's from LA, and we decided to stay. And then at that point, I worked as a sysadmin for a few years. I started podcasting. I did a show for the longest called Productivity in Tech because I was one of those folks who was really into productivity, hacking and all that stuff. Now that I'm older, I realize that that's maybe less important these days. I still do a productivity podcast, but it's a different style of show. And then I got into marketing because I just wanted to get out of my IT job, and I was so tired of being a sysadmin and just wanted something different. And I was really cool with the marketing director. And my winning argument was, you were bold enough to hire me. You wouldn't you were bold enough to interview me. You wouldn't hire me if you didn't think this interview was worth something. So if I convince you to get into this room with me right now in the middle of our lunch break, then I must be worth investing in. I know the company, I know the team, I know your stack because I've been the sysadmin behind keeping it up and running this whole time. You could probably trust me to do this work. And he was like, that's a great pitch. You're hired. I was a terrible employee because I did not want to be there. Not gonna lie. That's also when I found out I had ADHD. That made a lot of things make sense. And after that, I'd been programming in Python. I wanted to be a software engineer. I'd made a bunch of friends, and I said, hey, this DevRel thing sounds kind of cool. I'd love to be a developer advocate. And then my entire friend group at that time was like, Operation Get Jay hired right now. And the community just showed up for me. Like, I had people in the Python community putting their name on the line for this, I would say kid, but I was like 30 at the time, that was like, give this person a shot. They know Python. They've been doing this in their room, on their own for 6 years by now. Just do it. Also, they make podcasts and stuff, so the content angle's there. And then I got picked up by Elastic, the people who make Elasticsearch, and somehow at a South by Southwest event at like 10 o'clock at night, Erin's asking me to go ride scooters to our like group dinner. And yeah, I think we survived that, and we've been friends ever since. So now I'm here. Yeah.
The rest is history. It all started. So we had the same, that means that we started DevRel at like the same time then.
I was at Elastic for about a year and some change before we met. I think it was like about a year.
Yeah, we're about the same time because I was at Elliott doing open source community stuff.
Yep. Okay.
So very similar. Very cool.
Yeah.
And
I think, Erin, I mean, about everybody.
Erin does know everyone.
Yeah, I don't know what. How is
I
this
don't know what I
possible?
do. This is actually, no, I think the only thing, so growing up, I will go into my little anecdotal thing of the thing that I think is my secret weapon in DevRel. I'm embracing it now. I used to be ashamed of it, but I'm embracing it. My parents, mom's kind of a type A person. Very intense, for lack of extremely competitive, very intense. Don't know where I get that from. Also very ADHD. But my mom, I remember like in undergrad, I was a student athlete. My mom was a dual sport athlete, and she's in the Hall of Fame at Washington State University.
That's cool.
For athletics. And I called her like my first week of college, being like, I hate practice. My shoulders hurt. I can't do this. And she was like, cool, you're there. There's 1,000 other people that would like to be in your position. So you can quit complaining or you can do the thing. And then the other, like, that other big one was like, don't be like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Someone's going to tell you no, and you're going to get kicked off the team. Like, if the worst that you're scared of is no, then you probably should get more things to be scared of.
I just got over my fear of constantly being fired, like, you know, and I've never been fired. Like I've never been laid off. I've never been fired. And I have like this constant dread of like every meeting I would go into is like, oh no, this is it. This is the big moment.
I think that comes with working in tech.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you not been laid off in tech? I've been laid off 3 times in tech. What?
So
yeah, you and Erin are the opposite. I think Erin got you all your last jobs and layoffs.
You were layoffs.
I don't tell my boss who's also been on this show. Apparently I haven't been labeled as a job hopper yet. And what I will say is this is like the 3rd company I've worked with in like 5 years. It's not out of like wanting that. It's just that's how things have progressed. So there's definitely this moment of like when people are like, oh, you're a job hopper. And it's like, I don't want to be. Like, I want stability. I want like that constant idea of like, I'm going to be in the same spot for a while. But what I've learned is it doesn't seem to happen to anyone. Like, you either are a job hopper or you're constantly hit by layoffs, and like, you don't want a job hop, but you have to. So the people who have been able to survive in like a single place for more than like 6 years, please tell me what the secret is, because I want that. It just seems like that's not a possibility anymore these days.
I did last at one place for almost 7 years.
Oh.
And I would say but I was not in the same role for that time. Jumping onto like different roles and things like that. So I think it's a little bit easier at a larger company.
I do like the comment. I'm also passionate about being able to afford rent. Yeah, very, very much so.
Yeah.
But I will say, apparently I'm quieter than usual. I don't know. It's my mic. What's wrong with my mic? I'll fix it.
Or are we just louder than usual?
I was going to say we might just be louder than usual. Erin and I get together and everyone in the state knows that it's happening because we're both very... I feel very reserved right now. I get to hang out with Erin and it's like we're partying.
It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And then like Jen comes in the mix and it's like chaos.
Yeah.
I'm turning my mic up a little bit there. So hopefully that makes Cassie happy. But yeah, I think it's easier to do at a big company because you can jump over. Like I think if you're in DevRel, it's usually you're gonna last that long. Usually, but I will say that basically I've figured out that you didn't matter if you're a big company or a little company. You're just as likely to get laid off.
Yeah,
at one. It's just, you know, I used to feel like being at a smaller startup was always a risk, and it was like. Then I was at like big companies, like even at Adobe, they were laying off people all the time. So like every few months, it was like, oh, the next round of layoffs is coming.
I like the one thing that's happened. Oh, hey Tim, welcome back. One of the things, like, this is my first time having a peer in the devs, or I guess other than Orbit. I did have Brian Robinson, but it was kind of weird because we like worked together, and then. Like we were like, yay, we're working together, awesome, woo! And then it was like we lost our manager, and so we had like a manager for 3 weeks, and then we all got laid off. So it was a lot of like our version of being team DevRels. We're like, what are we doing? Like co-partner?
I feel bad because again, someone was asking, are we talking about being laid off? And I'm like, I don't have this experience. I don't know what it is, and I kind of hope to keep it that way, but also. Similarly, I think that the community that I run with Black Python devs, we did this exercise where a couple of folks were like, hey, my conference talk was rejected. What did I do wrong? And my first thought was like, okay, we need to reframe this. Could you have done some things differently? Maybe, but let's not start the conversation at what did I do wrong? Let's start the conversation at let's look at the situation here. And ultimately, when you're one of 700 people asking to take one of 20 spots, that doesn't mean that you did something wrong. That means you were not one of 20. And there could be a plethora of reasons, some of them which you have zero control over, that means that you were not one in those 20. And I think that taking that same approach towards, I got laid off, again, having never experienced that before. So I'm saying this without the context of I've been there, I've had that feeling. I don't have that. But I hope that I hope we don't have to normalize it, because I hope the layoff stuff just kind of stops happening like this, because it's been wild the last few years. But I hope that when these things do happen, that we can stop framing it as in I got laid off, what did I do wrong, versus I got laid off or I was hit by these layoffs. What was the situation that caused this to happen? And if there are some resiliency techniques, or if there are some things that might make me stand out in the crowd in my CFPs, how do I start adopting those in a way that I don't sacrifice my personality, my style, the things that make me who I am, the things that make my talks who I am? How do I preserve that while also kind of shoring myself up, or maybe also being ready to go in the event that something like that happens?
Well, I think one way that I had to learn to this, actually the most recent job search. So for context, my last 2 roles, I was at Orbit a year and 9 months. And then my last role was actually only 8 months, because they needed to pivot. And I was like, well, that's it, I guess. Was not planning on that happening in an 8-month period. Was really enjoying what I was doing. Crap. And found myself in these positions. Very fortunately, had a financial cushion both times where I could take time off. I picked up freelance contract, but definitely went through the what am I doing wrong? Because at that point, I also had been labeled a job hopper, because they saw the short period of time in my last 2 roles and they were like, you're not committed. And I distinctly remember one company I interviewed with, they wouldn't even look at me as a conversation as a job hopper. And I was and part of it is companies need to take responsibility. Do I think they always will? No. But I had 2 companies that were like, we're not even proceeding you in the interview process because we want someone who proves they're more committed. And I'm like,
it's ridiculous, because it's if it was oh, you left, it's one thing, but that I wouldn't. I think it's not disqualifying, but it's might warrant a conversation of so I can understand why the choices you made,
Yeah.
But in your case, it's you didn't even make a choice. You got you got laid off.
Titled goodbye. That was my layoff. One of my layoffs was being literally added to a Slack channel titled goodbye. It's great.
I had a conversation with one of my bosses years ago about this, and we were I forget how we got to this point, but I told him, I said, listen, it's pretty clear to me that whether I'm a good employee or a bad employee, and I think I'm a good employee, and you think I'm a good employee, so but that doesn't matter when it comes to layoffs. That it's just a matter you're just, especially at a big company, it was we're lopping off this branch. I didn't see what leaves were on that branch. Just cutting it off.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant what's on the branch, and even in terms of even at a smaller company when I've seen layoffs, it's okay. I mean, some of the people you're okay, I maybe there was reason, but when you look at as the totality of everybody who got laid off, it's okay, there was a lot of really good people there. So clearly there was just, whether you were good or you were bad didn't really ultimately matter. They just cut roles, cut departments. Whatever.
I love your confidence and just believing that you were a good employee, because I think that that's something that I struggle with. Yeah.
I literally, so the person who I went and joined Launch Darkly for, Cody, I think my first month, I used to ping him every week, and I still ping Brian regularly. I'm like, am I okay? Am I good here? Do I tell him?
I literally have to tell Erin, I'm like, Erin, you're doing too much.
I told my old boss something very similar. I was like, look, I trust that you haven't, like, you would tell me if I was doing a bad job, but sometimes hearing that you're doing a really good job can give me the fuel to not ask you that exact question for, if I just hear, hey, awesome work on this, good job. Like, that's enough to drive a month of that. Like, so, hey, I haven't been complimented on this. And again, I think some of that comes back to like my military background, whereas there were very set ways to know if you were doing the thing. Most of the time it meant that like human lives were not being lost, or, you weren't being physically punished for your actions. So there were these clear indicators of like I was doing a good job. And the thing that really became a culture shock for me was when I left the military and became a sysadmin, there was that loss of like direction. Having ADHD, being in the military, perfect, super regimented. You know exactly where you got to be when you got to be there, and if you don't do it, you go to jail. So like, cool, like I can deal with those high stakes consequences on a regular basis. But when someone's like, all right, hey, here's our goal for the next like year, let's all just work towards that, and everybody knows what they should be doing, right? Okay, good, ready, break.
I sit there and spiral and it's actually one of the things of like that's hard for me because I came from being an athlete, and so being an athlete, it was like you win or you lose. And being in competitive racing type sports, your goal was 0. Like, I did a stupid sport. Why did I do a stupid sport? I don't know. You're alone for hours and my goal was 0. Like, it is literally to go fast. And it's just like, how close are you to 0 today? That is an impossible, terrible goal. But I love it. It's that regimented thing.
And you both ended up in DevRel, which is like the hardest thing to measure success on. So it's hard to know. It's hard to know by default, like what, I'd say like I knew I was a good employee because my bosses were good at making sure I knew that. Like they told me when I was, and I think that, so there's part of that problem is a management issue. Manager, if your manager's not making you clear, I have had some really good managers at times.
I've had
some terrible ones too.
I've had really good managers in DevRel, and a few friends that I think were good managers, but didn't. It wasn't that they were a bad manager or I was a bad employee. It was just that manager-employee relationship just was not going to ever probably work. And I think a lot of that is working at a company or working on a team where your individual career goals are not like antithetical to or like the opposite of what the company is trying to do. And this is, we're not here to spill tea, but like making the decision to leave my former employer where I worked at Microsoft. People know this. If they know me, they know this. The decision to leave Microsoft had nothing to do with my team. My team is a bunch of rock stars. I love that team to this day. I hope I'm going to see them in like a month, and I want to give all of them a hug because they're all so amazing. And I had this sense of like I was letting them down by leaving. But when you're at a company like that, your goals are, if they're not in line with the company's goals, if your career ambitions are not in line with the path that they want to carve out for you, you will sit there and you'll sit there for who knows how long until enough people leave that opportunity finally takes its position, versus being able to jump into a team that says, we are looking for these particular things. And you're like, I kind of want to provide those particular things. That sounds like a fantastic combination. And going and chasing after that instead.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing. And I think one thing, and I hope I'm like comfortable talking on this like ADHD thing. One thing that I remember you and I chatted about actually right before, I don't remember if it was this role or the last one, like writing that, kind of creating awareness so your manager does know where you're coming from. I think there's a lot of value in that. I know you and I went into this conversation of like, and I know I have a public how to work with me document of like, here's the things I suck at. I am bad. Saying no, bad. I think I'm letting people down all the time. Like, these are things I'm bad at. But that's one thing that I really learned from you is like, how do you communicate that to your manager? And sometimes that means communicating that something isn't working, which is hard, scary, gross.
I think a fantastic advocate, which I'm not sure if they've been on the show or not, totally should be. Shout out Wesley Faulkner, who, after having a great conversation with Wesley, like we sat down and we talked about like, look, no one legally will sit down and tell you that you need to divulge that you have ADHD to your employer. That is your decision and your decision alone to make. However, if you choose to, there are some protections that can be afforded to you depending on the work that you do. There are some things that you can actually get that will help structure your work in a way that allows you to do better work. And to be honest, you can't even begin to have those conversations without sharing that piece of yourself. So again, this isn't me saying, and I gave a few talks on this, and I can't remember the names of them now, but they were basically like ADHD and advocacy, like advocating for yourself when you have ADHD. At the end of the day, by opening up or even like confiding in someone that isn't in like an official capacity and saying like, hey, I have this diagnosis. It's a part of who I am. It's a part of my thing. I might need a little help. Like that's going to help you out in so many instances where the default state is just, oh, Jay's not at his desk a lot during the day. And it's like, no, I'm not at my desk, but I'm also on my phone walking around the street, like checking Slack, checking email, doing all those things because I write emails better when I'm pacing and not like while I'm sitting at this desk going, I don't know how to start. So
wow, we're the same.
Yeah.
The number of emails I send from my phone is probably a scary amount. But I think the thing that like I actually have had to, and I think, it is something that was very hard for me to do in a previous role. I actually had to get HR involved and accommodations involved. And it was for no other reason other than it was a two-part problem, right? It was lack of management training. So I had a first-time manager who had not dealt with anybody with ADHD ever and was one of those people who were like, I have a very traditional developer background. I've been a developer and then I've been a mathematician, like very traditional dev background. And then you have me, the self-taught chaos person. And a lot of the instruction was go do thing. And I'd be like, and I would do a bunch of things and I'd be like, is this good? And they'd be like, I think ? And eventually it came to the point of like having to go to HR and getting a two-way street of training for the manager to be like, yo, you can't manage like this. This is not successful management skills. But also like, let's put some structure in this team. You can't just say, go do the thing. It's not going to work.
Well, I mean, I think what you're talking, obviously there's some accommodation for ADHD, but what you're describing is just bad management anyway. Like it would be a bad manager for me without ADHD. It's like, it would be that, those are things that just, weren't going to be effective either way. I mean, I've had opportunities to manage people. It's like, you can't take the same, first of all, you can't take the same approach with it. They need something different. Like some people, you have to be a little more hand-holdy. Other people love the freedom of like, hey, just go, do, and it's just, you got to understand who you're working with.
I am definitely that second person. I have a saying that is let Jay cook. Sometimes I will be out in left field doing stuff and people will be like, I don't understand what Jay is doing. And then like 3 months later, there is some level of success that came in and it was like, yeah, I was working on that when I was out in left field doing that thing. Like I was putting the pieces in place to make that happen. And if you tried to reel me in before that, we don't get to where we are now. And a part of that, and Erin and I were actually talking about this, I think yesterday, was my personal style of developer advocacy is, as one of my former colleagues put it, and I am absolutely running with it with their permission, quintessentially community first. Mm-hmm. It is, at the end of the day, I love talking about code. I love writing code. I love doing these projects. I genuinely care about every person that I have an interaction with in the way that they need me in that moment. Sometimes they need a cheerleader. Sometimes they need, the high school football coach that is going to throw the chair across the stadium. And I am ready to be both of those at that time. And that may not look like it's going to provide that immediate win or that immediate tie back into what our OKRs or our metrics are. But what I promise is when I sit down and I have a conversation with that person and then I go, now look, in order to make this happen, we have to make sense of this from a business standpoint. Let's sit down and have this conversation too from that angle. They are much more willing to listen to me because they know that the only way that I'm able to be there for them in that moment is if we do the business side too. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to sit down and have conversations with CTOs, with decision makers, and them go, I would trust Jay to babysit my dog. Therefore, I know that Jay's not going to BS me just to get me to buy this product. If Jay works for this company, he probably cares enough about what they're trying to do, or at least has enough respect for it, that it might be something worth looking at. And I know that because more than anything, Jay is an authentic person. And talking about myself like that in the third person feels kind of weird when I talk about authenticity, but also like go with me on that of I do things genuinely because that first story, if I want to get into DevRel, people being like, let's drop everything and get them hired. And me going, okay, how do I replicate that on a one-to-one scale for all of the people that I'm interacting with? And sometimes the answer is I just can't, but at least I care about them enough to go, I can't, and here's why.
Yeah.
Well, and I know you're heavily involved in obviously heavily involved. You started Black Python devs, and then I know you're heavily involved in the Black DevRel community as well. And so like, I'd love to hear more about like that from that perspective as well. Like what kind of initiative, like what started this whole shenanigans?
I can start with BlackRel, the Black Developer Relations community. I had nothing to do with that. Roselle is the mastermind behind all of that. And it was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to be involved? And I'm like, sure, just tell me when to stop talking. And eventually I was like, I'm talking too much. And they were like, no, you're keeping the conversation going. Just keep being involved in that. So we have calls every other week. I think that there's a couple of folks in here that are a part of that. I also see one of my old coworkers, so that's like, hey, what's up? But there's this interesting space that allows people to not have to code switch. And I know that like folks tend to think like code switching is not this thing, but it is, and it's harder to work around than people expect. Like, I don't know when I'm code switching. There are times where I don't feel like I am the person talking on the stage, on the screen, on the thing. And then like all of a sudden it's just like, wait, what did I just say? Like, okay, pause, rewind that. Let's turn ourselves back into a human being and not some, robot just voicing words. But trying to get people to be also quintessentially community first is usually my MO. When people are like, I'm trying to get into DevRel, I'm like, why? And it better be because you care about all of my friends that are also in these communities. Because if not, I don't want you here. Not going to lie. Like, I just don't. And I've had that moment where I've interviewed people for DevRel roles, and like one person who will be unnamed, because honestly, I forgot their name. That's how angry I was at them. They flat out said, I've always pictured myself wanting to be one of the booth babes at conferences. And this was a guy. And I immediately just let them know, hey, look, that's just not how this community, this team, this ecosystem in general operates. Like, don't objectify people. Definitely not. I definitely don't want you talking to like our customers. If this is how you talk to me, like, I don't want you talking to our community members. I kind of don't want you talking at all. Please stop. Yeah. Thank you for your time. Yeah. Interview was over, no's across the board, reason being why, and then that's the end of the conversation there. But I also have folks that are very much like, I see the glamour that comes with DevRel. And I was like, you do? Do you see the anxiety? Do you see the, like, I don't know what I'm doing at any random point in time? Do you see the, I had to miss my kid's belt test in karate because I was at some conference that I had to be at to work at a booth, that I was doing a thing where like I didn't really know anybody at the moment, and I much rather have been at that belt test for my child. There were like a lot of things that people kind of see the cool side of it and they don't see the other sides. And when people are having these conversations, like, I want to expose those. I want to say, like, hey, the fun stuff is there. The stuff that kind of sucks too, it's also there. But then I get to meet like all of these amazing people. And in that moment, it's like, you know, you make new friends and you care about them, and you get to meet customers, and you can show that you care about them too. And you get to meet people in your community and people in your advocacy programs. And you're like, I legitimately couldn't have any of the success that I have without all of you out there doing these things. And I'm learning from you. So like, thank you.
Yeah.
And being in that, you're just like, that's cool. I want to show people that side of it and show them, like, again, I'm a college dropout. Most people, the first question I often get asked when people don't know me is like, oh, where'd you go to school? And I'm like, like, I went to high school at this place, but that's kind of it. And it's, conference crud, being sick all the time.
I literally just bought another 6-pack of Airborne because I'm about to be out in the world again.
Yeah, but
yeah, I think that's a really good perspective. And you know, the funny for me, I agree with that, because that's like when I get kind of worn down by stuff, like I do things like this where I get to meet people like you, or I go, like tonight I got to run my local meetup, or it's just like, it's a lot of work, but I gotta, you know, I'm gonna meet a whole bunch of people, and they all come, like, just how much this means to them, and it's like, okay, that's the stuff I care about, right? Like, but I also feel like, you know, that's not always aligned to company goals. Like, sometimes they care, sometimes they don't. And I'm not speaking specifically about Launch Darkly or anything. I just, at various times in my DevRel, it's been like, okay, this is why a lot of times I keep up the stuff that's somewhat independent, like CFE Dev, like the meetup group and stuff like that, because I feel like I can't always get that thing that I need out of the work I'm doing for the company. And so, like, I keep things going that give me that piece, so that I can, you know, at times when I'm feeling like, okay, I'm not totally thrilled with my work, but I'm still getting that piece I need out of the stuff I'm doing.
I think one thing that I would add, and this is alluding to the spicy takes, I think I actually texted, it was you and Rizal, we were talking about this, and it was and it was actually
spicy relish time. We always get a spicy take every show.
Spicy take from Aaron time.
We're gonna have like a little animated, like, spicy relish.
You have to change the background. All the pickles are red.
Fire. My pickles are now pickled peppers. And my spicy take was, and I think I sent it to Jay and Rizal in like one of these. Am I absolutely off the wall bonkers? Like, and my take was basically, is community alone dead? Like, is community dead? Meaning, we will not be hiring this role at companies to come. And it wasn't to say that community isn't dead, but I've had community in my title. I've been a community manager. I don't think it's like, I'm very involved in the comedy community here in New York. I'm involved in work communities. I'm involved in Twitch stream communities, like very involved, very active in these places. But the thing is like, sure, you're getting people together, but we forgot the do something.
Yeah.
Like, we forgot the great, you ran a meetup. Okay, but again, going back, is that business value? Is that partnerships? Is that ecosystem integration? Is that whatever else? Like, we are missing those bits in order to drive forward. And it can't just be community. And it's, now I have to like post the LinkedIn rant that I wrote 5 times, because I was like writing it and I would delete, and then I'd write and then be like delete, because I was like, is this too spicy to take? But
I mean,
you know, yeah, like, just, that's a take.
Jay's spicy take. This is why I don't go to DevRel conferences, because like, I'm like, what is the value? And I understand that there's value. Like, my personal value is I get to see a lot of my friends, which is great. But then, like, there's also like this like thought leader conversation, stuff like that, influencers in the DevRel space. And I'm like, most of these people are my friends. And if I really had these questions, I could just ask them. Or just get their opinions, or honestly, they have a podcast or a YouTube channel where they're sharing this information anyway. We don't need to all get together and do that. But I agreed with Erin on this. I don't necessarily think it's dead, but I think, again, let Jay cook. Like, this will tie back into a bottom line. I can bring this back into a bottom line. And it's not like I'm out doing my thing and hunt for the bottom line. It's like, I know what the bottom line is. I know how I can get there while serving the community, but also serving the company at the same time. And
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
And this is where, like, I agree that I think there are things that you can and should do that have zero to do with the company, because I think that keeps you grounded. I've definitely talked to people who have like, okay, you've been at this company too long. Like, everything you ever talk about is just some update that they're doing. And I'm like, I want to know, what do you like? Do you tap dance in the evenings? Do you snorkel like in your bathtub? Like, tell me something that you do that is not related to this company, because I want to talk and make a connection with the human, not the robot there. And like, Black Python devs is that. It is the moment of, I saw a desire for people to grow in the Python space. I will stand on principle and fight anybody who disagrees with me, that I say, when the Python community gets it right, they are the greatest tech community on the planet. Again, they will. Yes. I've watched owners, I've gotten manicures and pedicures with like founders of organizations and foundations, just for the sole purpose of like, we need to have a self-care moment right now. And it started as a joke, but all of PyCon US last year, my fingers and my toes were a lovely shade of green, because I was like, I'm about to be on my feet for the next like 24 hours. And I definitely need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And people who had no reason to care or want, did not impact them in any way, were like, absolutely, yes. In fact, this is a thing that we should do more regularly. What are you doing at the next event? Can I book the manicure pedicure appointment? And like, make it a thing. And there are a lot of folks in the community that when I ask, like, hey, are you at this meetup? Hey, are you at this event? Hey, are you talking to these people in the community? The answer is, why? It's like, oh, you don't know. Like, you don't know this secret, like the real community that exists. Like, you just know what's on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and you just know the AI generated stuff.
The stuff that I think I actually wrote this up for an internal thing recently, because someone was like, why do you invest in community? And I was like, one of those things of like those company things where you have to make a case for it. And so we're hosting a user conference in a couple of months. One of our speakers for our user conference, we needed to get speakers, came from someone who rejected me from a job 4 years ago. And I like have kept in touch. We've like socialized. I was like, super cool. We're shooting this stuff. And it's actually like one of the more talks that everybody's like excited about. And I'm like, it's never a direct line. Like, it's never a direct line between it. It's how do you nurture those relationships, whether it's tutoring or.
Yeah, I'd say in my experience, it is too. I just have a harder time convincing sometimes the drawing those lines aren't clear. So like, I do a lot of it outside of work, and then it comes back. It's like, oh, by the way, you need this, and like, I happen to know the people at this company, and I'll reach out to them, kind of thing. So it ends up coming back, which is why like I do a lot of stuff outside, but I've always had the support generally. I've only had one job where they were like, only if it doesn't affect your day-to-day work that you do for us. But everybody else is like, yeah, do it. It's fun. That's great. Because those relationships are that's the currency in DevRel, those relationships.
I love how, we in the last couple of years, we like developer advocates and like conference organizers have had like this beef of like, oh, all of our speakers are developer advocates and we don't want that. We want technicians and practitioners and all these other things. And I'm like, ¿por qué no los dos? Let's spread the love. And in fact, let's look at it this way. How about I will work with the developers, technicians, and practitioners. Instead of speaking, I'll serve on the organizing staff That way I have a reason to be there. And then I will get plenty of interface time to do my DevReli stuff. And if you need a speaker, or if a speaker drops out or something, like, I'm here, I'm ready, I can do the thing. But also, if you're worried about my talk being a sales pitch, I'm glad we're having this conversation 6 months before the conference, because I've established this relationship with you, and you know that, like, my first and foremost mission on this is quintessentially community first, and then figuring out how to tie that back into, but yes, let's be real, I'm here because the company I work for paid for me to be here. So let's address that too.
Balance in that. Like, I mean, I always think, like, I was very involved in still am in the PyData segment of the Python community. And I think those people, like, so helpful, so kind, but then also so many practitioners, which is great. But we're coming up on time, but I've got our pickle fact of the day.
Oh, does Jay even know what the pickle facts are? Like,
I don't know what the pickle fact is.
He's like, what's this? Okay, so
I do not tap dance. I do not sing. I do not know how to read music. I am musically untalented. But
you are a comedian, though.
I am a comedian. I couldn't do anything musically. You should karaoke. I'm only there for the embarrassing dance moves. Like,
well, they don't call it musically anymore. It's TikTok now.
Oh, yes. Obviously, duh. But I do ferment on the side. I grill and I ferment. So I make pickles. I made hot sauce by myself recently. It was very good. Haven't perfected the consistency on that one yet, but TBD, we got more. So anywho, Brian also just enabled me with a theme when I said Dev Relish, haha, like relish pickle theme.
And I was like, yeah, absolutely. That's actually what I was doing.
So needless to say, we have a pickle fact of the day, which gives me an amazing chance to run down a weird rabbit hole every day that we do this show.
Oh.
So without further ado, this one, I hope Tim's still watching, because this one's spicy and saucy today. I mean, I guess it's not really spicy and saucy, but it could be perceived. There's things. Pickling might be microbrewing IPAs for white women. But that's like probably like quick pickling. That's like quick pickling. I will stand on I make the actual growing mold in my cabinet pickling.
Tim wins.
I did that too. I did that too, and they had to take my cabinets out for growing mold in them because it was unintentional.
I just got very weird looks from my partner that was like, why are you closing? Like, what are you doing? Why is all our pantries on the floor? Like, why is all our pans? And I was like, don't worry about it. 3 weeks later, he was fine.
No.
It pickles. So the Pickle Packers International, it's a real group. I thought the same thing, everybody, and then I freaked out for a second. Pickle Packers International has its own official limerick and theme song, the Pickle Polka.
Are you guys singing?
I don't know what it is. I Googled 4 times, and I'm on the Pickle Packers International website, which is sponsored by the official sport of pickleballing, but not related to pickleballing. It is legit fermented food distribution, and there's tips on that. But they say that the pickle also got its name, which is somehow in this pickle polka song, in the 1300s when English-speaking people mispronounced, and I'm probably going to mispronounce it, William Buchel's name, which is a Dutch fisherman known for pickling fish.
Okay.
It was one of those, like, that's the more you know about pickles today.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep. So, yeah, bring that back to your manager and show them the value. You're like, well, I mean, it wasn't directly related to my job, but I did learn.
I learned this amazing lesson. I mean, that could be in a conference talk somewhere. You know, you can be talking about something AI, because that's what we apparently do these days, and you can just be like, what was the history of pickles? And then you can see if it was hallucinating, because you know.
I did give a pickle talk internally once, at Orbit actually. And then so Orbit, they had this like team culture thing, and it was like everybody share. It was hobby swap. So you had like a hobby and you would tell everybody about it, and it would rotate each month by someone random. And my turn was up, and I gave a 45-minute presentation or 35-minute presentation on cool molds. and talked about how mold could be used for food. And then that was the last hobby swap that we ever did at Orbit because
Well,
Well, we have weird talks. You should do a weird talk.
I
On
do.
fermenting?
I have been hit up for weird talks.
On fermenting?
No, I don't remember what it was about. I said
We should
yes.
do it
Someone
on
asked me if I would
fermenting.
talk about it, and then I was like, sure. Something that they found publicly on me, and they were like, would you want to talk about it? And I was like, sounds great. And I know it's in April, so stay tuned if you work at Launch Darkly in April. It's on my calendar.
Since we have so many, world-renowned developer advocates and DevRels in the chat, this is one thing that, for those that don't know, I've only been at Aiven for a month and some change now. One of the things that they do at Aiven that I think I am surprised I've never heard any other company do, like as a baked-in thing, is you have to do talk prep. You have to do talk practice. And it is like regardless of where you are presenting this talk, if it is at a conference, unless it's purely just like there is no business tie-in. But for those that don't know, I'm going to be giving one of the opening keynotes at PyCon US this year. And this was like kind of set in stone before I joined Aiven. And when I told them that, they were like, when are you signing up for your talk rehearsal on this? And I was like, oh, well, it's not a work thing, and it's about Black Python devs and not really about like, and they're like, so yeah, when are you going to sign up for your rehearsal on this? Because this is what we do. Like, we support one another. We provide our feedback. You can choose whether to accept it or not. And since it's not, tied into your job, technically, you don't have to do this, but we strongly encourage. And in fact, if it is a work-based talk, it's required. And I'm like, oh, interesting. And I've sat through like 5 of these now in like the last month, and the feedback is on point. It makes you actually be prepared before you're on the plane, like going to the conference, finish. Like, sure, you can make those small adjustments as they go, but like the level of excitement that people have, the level of kudos and compliments and actual critical feedback from people who get paid to do this kind of stuff, it is so valuable. And in my mind, I'm just like, why is this just not a thing everywhere? Like, it's just so great. I can't speak highly enough of it.
That's very
That
cool.
is a really good idea. I have not seen that before, but that's all right, y'all. Well, this was so much fun, Jay. Thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation. It's the first time we got to meet, and I met you. So thanks for this. This was a lot of fun. And as always, thank you, Erin. It's not so, now I see you tomorrow. I'm gonna see you tomorrow.
I'm gonna see you in Slack. I'm gonna see you tomorrow. I'm gonna see you in like 17 other Discords that we're in, and like
I can't even say goodbye to you.
Like, honestly,
always there.
Go away, Brett.
But all right, everybody, thank you all for joining us. We will, of course, have another Dev Relish next month. One of these days we'll figure it out.
We'll get a consistent schedule eventually. It's on some Wednesday or Thursday of the month, depending on work. Apparently, we're DevRels when we travel.
Yeah. Oh man,
it's
conference season's coming up.
So we will have Dev Relish coming up next month. So check out cfe.dev if you want to see when the next one is, or follow us on social. Also tomorrow, if you're interested, we have Twofold to Stack with Nikki T. He's going to be talking about Angular framework, analog.js, that's just reached version 1.0. It's basically full stack like Next.js for Angular. That's going to be tomorrow at 1 p.m. He's going to be live coding with that. So you can check that out. I've got lots more coming up on CFA.dev. So check us out there. All right. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Thanks again, Jay, for being here. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, friends. Bye.